In September of 2019, we finally did a trip that I'd been planning for quite some time. I'd heard that you could drive across the railroad tracks at Promontory Point and been wanting to do that for quite a while over towards the Lucin Sun tunnels. So we started by going up to the Golden Spike Monument and seeing the replica steam engines. We learned quite a bit about them, mainly that they drove really slow, 25 miles an hour, and they needed to stop for water every 15 to 30 miles. So it was a pretty slow way of transportation, but it was cool to see the replicas and learn more about them. The Jupiter came from the west, and the 119 came from the east.
Here, and then one final whistle when it comes to a complete stop. So at this point, the crew is in the finish.
This is a replica of the original board they used to drive the Golden Spikes into. Part of the demonstration was to take the 119 back away, switch tracks, and do a flyby.
And then on another boat through San Francisco Bay and then up the Sacramento River. Finally get to Sacramento City 6 months later. That's only counted the time that they need to put the locomotive back together. There's another whistle and it gets near the street right here.
So in my mind, the plan was to drive down the west side of Promontory Point, the red road you see here, get down to the tip, and then drive across the railroad tracks that go across over to the West Desert. I thought we could do this, but when we got there, it was evident that that was not the case. All we saw was a no trespassing sign, and so we had to turn around and drive clear all the way back up. After that long detour and driving to Snowville to get more gas, we actually found what we were looking for, the Transcontinental Railroad, the old track where it used to go up around the north and the west side of the lake. We followed the old track and you could drive on a lot of it. There were no more railroad rails because they had been picked up and used to make ships during World War II, and the ties had been plowed off to the side. So it was pretty fascinating to see the old grade and to be able to drive some of it. Along the way, there were these signs which gave you more information about all the ghost towns and all of the supply stations that were necessary to get water to those locomotives and fuel. Another thing about them is they burned wood or coal, and the interesting thing about that is they could carry enough wood to go about 30 miles as well. They could carry enough coal to go 130 miles, but it was only available out on the East Coast. So it was kind of a project getting these things moving. It was also pretty fascinating to see the ghost towns and the cemeteries and the remnants of what existed back in those days. It had been a pretty rainy night all night long, but that gave us some pretty fascinating scenery with all the cloud layers and everything along the way. It also gave us many puddles to drive through, which kept Eric entertained along the way. Lucin was one of the bigger ghost towns, and the sun tunnels were a greasy, slippery mess. But the views across from the west side of the lake were spectacular.